membership meeting. So back to meeting in person, which is great. This is our first meeting in person every year.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the last 8,000 years here. What do you think? And
I like it.
I promise to do that in less than 30 minutes. How's that? Okay? Let me get this so I'm not touching it. You all have been here before, right? Do you know where you are right now? Do you know where you would have been 10,000 years ago? Don't make it 12.
No.
Underwater?
No, close. Not water, but ice.
Ice.
Absolutely. So let me give you my first audio clue. I have a cheat sheet here. And if I can find these on my phone, and my phone keeps working, and we go to this first one, I want you to listen. Hopefully you can hear this. And I want you to tell me what this sound is. Huh?
Glacial ice.
There you go. If you were under a 2-mile high glacier, this is what it would sound like. Okay. But how do you know? Well, I have to, full disclosure here. That's not really a glacier. It's the sound of an overstuffed chair, leather, I think, with somebody squirming around it. But you get the point that
Yeah.
it was crunching and squeaking and all these kinds of groaning sounds. Who knows? Has anybody here been under a glacier? Nope. I've been on top of one, but I haven't been underneath one. So we'd have to guess. But the important part of that is, where was the glacier?
Everywhere.
Right here?
Well, here, and where did it end? See that river down there? Did it end at Newport? No. How about Block Island? Even further out. In fact, they're doing a research program right now where they're going out and going underwater and finding tree stumps on the
Wow.
other side of Block Island. Because, guess what, folks? That's where the land was. So, when people moved into this area, and let me give you a sound of people moving into the area here. Here we go.
Motorcycles?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you hear that?
Horses?
Close. They didn't have horses then. The horses, by the way, there were horses here like 150,000 years ago, but they died or disappeared.
Woolly mammoth.
Woolly
And-
mammoth.
Close. So who else would have been here?
Dinosaurs.
Well, a lot longer ago than that.
Meerkats.
Who?
Horseshoe crabs.
People. Okay, after the glaciers receded, you got to remember, those glaciers melted. The land was out there, and then gradually the glaciers melt and retreat, and the river begins to form, and the whole bay begins to form. There wasn't any bay here originally, and as the ice melts, the water flows out, and you begin to get a whole different geography here. And what you have here, anybody been up on Main Street? Yeah. How much higher is Main Street than where we are right now?
20 feet.
About
20 feet.
close,
I think.
about 30 feet. Okay. Well, from the bike path up there, and if you go up Bridge Street, you'll see the rise there.
Yeah.
This is an esker. This is a glacial till that's been moved down here over that period of time and deposited here. So if you were here about 1900, Julie, you've
Yep.
got a picture.
I do.
And
I
what-
gave it to you.
Yes, you did. And it's now on the historic marker over there.
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful.
That wonderful picture, thankfully that we have one photo that shows where was the land here? At this level or higher up?
Higher up.
Higher up, 30 feet, okay? Because if you go from Main Street over here and finally down to the edge of the parking lot, okay, the land was 30 feet higher.
Wow.
Not just here, all the way over there.
So it was like a bluff along the river?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you look at that picture, you can see they're standing on top of it, and you can see that they're above Water Street there, and all this,
Like a bluff.
like a bluff, a sand dune bluff. In fact, this whole area was filled with glacial till, which essentially translates to sand and gravel, okay? So it was here and extended all the way through the park. What else was here in the park? If you've got sand and gravel 30 feet up, trees, okay? This did not look anything like this then, okay? This is, we're going back to before 1920, okay? So you have this whole area here with trees on it, and Louise Solomon tells me that her father talked about playing in a treehouse on top and on one of the trees over here. So
It was Mr. Hall.
yes, right. So you get this whole history of this area here, and when you go, next time you go up Bridge Street, think about that. You're going up the glacial till here and seeing that whole area, okay? So people started moving in here sometime after 12,000 years ago when the glaciers retreated, because you can't live on ice. So as animals moved here, trees began growing up, one thing or another. People began moving into the area. And they not only moved by foot, but they also moved by some other form of transportation.
Boat.
Thank you.
Of course a boat.
I was gonna say, you know, you really ought to think about this, you know. People have been in boats here for a long time, Julie, you know. So you're just carrying on a fine tradition here.
That's right.
And if you're traveling, there are no roads, there weren't even any good trails at that point, but you could carve out a log and paddle a mashoon, they call that, to get from place to place. And that's how we think most people settled along this area, okay? Clever folks. And they also did something else to this area. My phone will cooperate. Here we go. You gotta tell me what the next sound is. If I can find it in the list here. There we go.
Fire.
There you go, fire. Right. What did people here use fire for?
Cooking.
Well, heat and cooking and everything else, but even more importantly, for clearing the land.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? Verrazano, remember him? Okay, came here in 1514, spent 2 weeks here. He talked about the cleared land for 20 or 30 leagues. We're talking 60 to 90 miles of cleared open land. Okay, was that a natural phenomenon? No, it was man-made. People came here and burned down the forest in order to
Farm.
and hunt. Okay, far easier to hunt when you don't have all that going. You've been through the woods around here. We don't burn anything anymore, unfortunately. So this was open land, okay, and it was called by Miles Standish we were the flower, Flour, of the garden, the garden of the patent, and this was our location. All right.
So Jason, how far was the land cleared like that? All the way up to like.
Go 90 miles.
Like,
Well, you're down.
starting in
First of all, Verrazano was down in Newport.
Okay.
Okay, but he sent people probably up this river, okay, and as far as they could see, this was open, cleared land,
Wow.
all right? Which is why when the Pilgrims got here, they said, hey, this is good. we left England where there's no land, and now here we are, okay? So, our,
Wait a second, if they burn the land, what happened to the indigenous people that were on that land?
oh, no, they had lots of experience. You wait for the wind, you stand upwind, you light your fires, let the fires burn, and then eventually burn out, or the next rain shower takes care of it.
So there was nobody living on that land?
Well, not during the time they were burning it, they'd get everybody off, okay? These fires only lasted like a few days. Check it out. If you're from California, you know about fires, right?
No, what I'm trying to understand is where were the indigenous people when they were burning down the land that had been there, that was their land?
They moved all the time,
They move constantly. Yeah.
right? They had no permanent structures. You know, everywhere you went, you build your house.
But they also managed forests. by
Absolutely.
burning.
Oh,
And that
it was
was,
the
that
indigenous
that was a
people that burnt the
cultural
land.
thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I
And
misunderstood.
so to think that people were here just sort of living primitively, no way. I mean, this is very managed land in that sense. So when the English people arrived here from Leiden and all that, they came here and what did they bring with them?
Disease.
Huh?
Disease, exactly.
Disease, right. Their first gift, isn't it wonderful? Okay. The second one was genocide, but they start with disease, okay? And 90% of the population was wiped out along the Massachusetts coast. Okay,
Wow.
90% dead. All right. We just went through a pandemic where we lost what, 0.5% of the population. I don't know the figures, but the point being that it made a huge difference in terms of the people living here. To lose, not just, you think about it, it's not just the people, but the resources. They lost their elders,
Yeah.
all their history, their warriors, all their defense capacity. They were completely disabled.
Yeah.
And because of that, they made a compact with who? The Pilgrims.
Pilgrims, yeah.
Okay? Because what did the Pilgrims have? Guns. Okay? If you've got guns, you can keep your enemies at bay. And who are their enemies? The Narragansetts on the other side of the river here, okay?
Yeah.
Who would already have been trying to move into this area. So, because the Massasoit Osamequin had lost his warriors along the coast, he had to come up with a plan, and the plan was engage the native people here in a compact that lasted over 50 years. We'll defend you, you defend us, and they kept Canonicus at bay. It worked, okay? And until he died and was buried where? Right over
Here.
there.
Yep.
Right. And then we'll talk about that later. So, you've got all the folks here. Then, of course, we have, what did our Pilgrim people do? They like doing this. Here, I'll do the visual.
Chopping down.
Chopping down trees, right.
But the trees are gone, they burned them all.
Well, a lot of them they burned, but then what do you do with the tree once you fell the tree? You build
Build
what?
houses,
A house, a permanent structure.
forts.
okay, Which the people who have been living here for 10,000 years never heard of. Who would do that? You build a permanent structure, and then what do you have to do? You have to bring all your resources to that, as opposed to the sensible thing, build a temporary structure and move to the resources, right? You know? So, after they were here, the English moved in, and we're coming up to 1854.
Wow.
Anybody know what happened here?
The train. No, train.
Where was the train? Right over
Bike
there.
path.
Went by, right by our house. They had something like 20 trips a day or something. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And they started out with a steam engine and then migrated to electric. But this That's what you would hear. Good thing, all day, going by here. And it was very successful in populating the area because now people from Providence could come down here and work. And that's when we went from a little backward farm town to, tourister and factories and the whole thing here. So, when the railroad went through, they began digging things up. Anybody know what they would have dug up remember this was a big hill with lots of trees, and they would dig into it, and they would use it for gravel because if you're going to do a railroad, you got to keep it level. And you go down the bike path here, and you get past Beach Street, the land goes down. So what do? You take some of the sand and gravel here, you put it on a train car. They had steam shovels back then, and then began to fill in and level the railroad track. Worked out pretty well, huh? The only problem is when you're digging into the gravel here, what are you going to find?
Burial
There
ground.
you go. Right.
Indian burial.
Indian burials, although they didn't even know that they were Indians. There was a lot of speculation. They thought they might be African. They didn't know who they were because there had been no history. And back then, what were we part of? What town were we in?
Bristol.
Pardon me?
Bristol.
Bristol, right, 1873. Bristol gave up the land from the current boundary down there and gave this to Warren. They were supposed to get something in return, but it never happened. So we lucked out. Besides, people like to think of themselves as living in Warren because where would you go? On Sunday, you would go to church in Warren. You would go to the stores in Warren. You would go to the wharves in Warren. This was the place here. So you had everybody coming through here and digging up graves and finding skeletons all over there, all kinds of newspaper articles you can read about. And so our friend, who was the library director at that time?
Charles Carr.
Charles Carr. What was his claim to fame? What did Charles like to do? Well, like all librarians. Archaeology, right. Yeah, he was an amateur archaeologist, and he loved finding native artifacts and one thing or another. So he did this.
What's that? You cold?
Catalog?
He dug.
Dug things with
Yeah, he started digging things. And in fact, his dig was right over there. Not down here, but over there. And I found his notebook, which is at Ithaca, at Cornell, in the library there. So if you want to see all the pages, you're welcome to them.
I have a question.
Sure.
If they leveled this land, then why do we still have 2 miles left?
Because the town purchased this land at the time that Charles was protecting that side of things.
Oh, okay.
And this land was leveled in order to make a park. If you go right there, there's the marker. I don't even need a picture. You'll read 1924. That's when the, stands were constructed. But about 1920, the town purchased this from the railroad. It was just a messed up gravel pit at that time. And by then we had bulldozers, right? So if you have a bulldozer, what can you do?
A lot of damage.
You can a lot of damage. There you go. So these are the bulldozers working here. This is figured bulldozers in 1920. They're steam operated. Made a lot of noise. One thing or another. But you were not going to clear this area by hand. Okay? Not going to happen. But if you have a couple of clunky old bulldozers, you can level this land. So here it is, all the way down to the beach, and where the parking lot now is no longer 30 feet high, it came down. Okay? And I don't know when Water Street was connected there.
I know that the corner of Campbell and Water was actually water.
Yes,
There
right,
was no intersection.
right. You couldn't come down here.
Couldn't come down.
So probably at some point in the 20s, and there's also work done by the Works Progress Administration down there. You'll see the little seals, and so by the 30s, you know, we had a beach and we had a park and the whole thing.
So they weren't too careful when they were digging, unfortunately.
Well, at that point, no.
So there's probably a lot lost, unfortunately.
Well, Carr was pretty well convinced that he'd found all the grave sites, and they were mostly on the north end there. So, who knows? I mean, there's no record of any of this. I've looked. The town doesn't have any record. You know.
So what did they do with the skeletons?
Well, how many houses are there in Warren? How many attics? How many basements?
Okay.
I mean, people just took them home. He tried to convince people to give them to him, and he had quite a collection. If I didn't bring the book with me, but I should have. But Susan Gibson published a book. She's from a researcher from Brown in 1980, the same year that we moved in. It has a picture with our house in the background there, but she cataloged well over 300 items here, and so at least, you know, for those people who think cataloging native relics is a good thing, there is some record of that. But in fact, not all native people think that digging up grave sites is a good idea. Why is that? Huh?
Sacred land.
Yeah. How many of you go to your grandparents' grave and just dig it up, huh? Or let somebody else dig up your grandparents' grave and take the things out of there, huh? How would that be? Okay, think about it. 1992, the Native American Gravesite Reclamation Act, federal law that said if it comes out of a grave, it has to go back to the tribe. And starting in early 90s or so, roughly, right? When Sarah was library director, people from not our Poconoke tribe here, but from the Mashpee tribe came, and in fact several tribes, right, and said, this is our stuff, you got to give it back. So Sarah and I packed stuff up and waited for 3 years, and then finally somebody came and got it, right? Yeah. So we think nearly everything that was recoverable from museums did come back, and then for the grand finale conclusion of this, we had a ceremony here. Anybody attend that May 17th, 2017? Here in the park? Did you go? Yeah. Anybody? You were there? Who else? Anybody else? Yeah. Good. Okay. So the Mashpees invited town officials and about, I'd say, 150 or so people who came from the tribes, and they got permission from the town and brought an excavator up there, dug a hole for a 10 by 10 foot concrete vault, lowered that into the ground, and then in a private ceremony, because this was sacred land, they returned over 600 burial items. So they're back there. We think with Osamequin's items there as well, because around 1904, don't quote me on the date, Virginia Baker reported that in one of the graves that was dug up here prior to Carr, they found a red horseman's coat, lace, gold lace, all of that. They know Ed Winslow gave to Osamequin as a gift and a copper chain necklace. There's a picture of it in the Heffenreffer collection. So that's almost certain that that grave was Osamequin's grave. So when they say that Osamequin was buried here, this is like George Washington being buried here, okay? That we're pretty certain that that was his grave. And if you go read the inscription on the monument, that's to Osamequin. Okay? So,
Are you saying those two items were among the things that were found?
that's what Virginia Baker reported around the
Virginia
turn of the
Baker.
century. Right. Yeah. We don't. I presume they're in the gravesite. That's where they should be. And then I will finish with the ceremony that was held here. This is a recording of the people who were here 4 years ago. So if you would like to hear some more drumming, come on August 8th. It's a Sunday afternoon. The tribe will be up there around the gravesite, and this is essentially an open house for the Poconoke tribe, a chance for you to get to meet them and talk with them and hear some of their stories and look at some of the items that they bring and one thing or another. So plans are underway. That will occur on the 8th because the 9th, we all know as in Rhode Island fashion, what is August 9th? Real quick. Victory Day, right. Okay. But it's also International Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay. So we're going to transform that into Indigenous Peoples Day, and that will be your chance there. Also, a couple of quick items. Anybody read Philbrick's Mayflower? Okay. Come over to, bring your book, and come over to Inkfish from noon to 2 o'clock on Sunday the 27th, and Nate will be there, and they'll sign your book. Okay? And we have any other things going on? Oh, the tribal historian Don Brown will be at Inkfish on the what's art night? 24th, on the 24th, and that's in the evening, right?
Yeah.
Like 7 to 9 or something. He'll be at Inkfish, and he's going to describe what's going on in the painting. Anybody seen the painting over at Inkfish? Okay. That was a painting that was commissioned with a J. Berry Cultural Arts donation to WPS, where we engaged the artist Ruth Major, who's out in the vineyard, to do a painting, not just do a painting, she researched it. She came here, we took her out to the where Roger Williams' shelter is, and just over the line in Swansea. And we described the whole area for her, and then if you go to Inkfish, you can pick up a whole booklet that explains what's going on in the painting. We're also going to be using the painting in the schools to teach our children who lived here a lot longer than any Europeans, okay, and what the story was there. So that'll be a good opportunity. And am I leaving anything out? Yes. Just heard today that from Tucker Wright that the Adelia Whitcomb, I got that right? Trust Fund is giving WPS another grant to purchase the painting that's at the George Hale Library. If you haven't seen it, go in. It's right there behind the desk. You can't miss it. It's a painting that Ruth did of Osamequin, wearing his red horseman's coat and bead necklace that was given to him by Ed Winslow. When did Winslow come here? His first visit. Remember, the treaty was signed in, actually they started the treaty, right, John, the 22nd of March, came back on April Fool's Day and signed the treaty, okay? And that's only funny because of what happened 50 years later. But Winslow decided, in fact, Governor Carver just said, check out his house. So he and Stephen Hopkins walked 42 miles and arrived right here in Warren on July 3rd, 1621. And had a nice 3 or 4 day visit with Osamequin, right here, okay? So we got history right here. So
Sure do.
that's the history of Burrs Hill and everything around it. How's that? Okay.